Join the coven. Being invisible is not what you think it's like. Part 1. A story written by poloniumpoisoning. I wish I was invisible. How many times did you tell yourself that? Did you tell your parents that? Did you tell your friends after having a bad day? You don't want to die. You don't want to be wiped off from the face of the earth. You simply want to stop being noticed. I can't say I had the worst life, but I didn't have it easy either. I was the oldest of 3 children, no father. I had to postpone my graduation, if that was ever happening someday, to work full-time and support my teenage brother and sister. I used to be just average enough to go unnoticed, and everything was fine. Until I started working for a certain multi-international fast food company where everything is oily. At first I started stress eating, which made me gain a lot of weight quickly. Then, from the anxiety, unhealthy eating, and the sultry, greasy air, my skin had an awful break of acne at 20. And by awful, I mean my face looked like the outside of a sugar apple. And I had no money to spare in beauty treatments. The clients and my coworkers looked at me in disgust. They used to barely acknowledge I was there, and this unconcern made me comfortable. I never wished to be pretty, because that would attract attention too. I wished I could disappear. I didn't want to die, because my siblings needed me. But I wanted people to stop looking at me. The day I became invisible had been particularly bad. A customer spit on my face because they said I gave them wrong change. I didn't. My manager didn't stand up for me. Instead, he apologized and gave them a free burger, then proceeded to lecture me about how gross I looked and how I was a shame for the whole company. I went home, made us some insipid food with what few cheap protein and vegetables we had in the fridge, then collapsed in my bed to cry myself to sleep. To make things worse, I had to share a bedroom with my 14-year-old sister, who often spent the whole night texting with her friends, laughing, and constantly having her phone screen lighting. Usually it comforted me a little to know that at least she was enjoying her golden years in ways I was never able to, because I had to look after her. But that day, I felt nothing but annoyance. I want to disappear, I whispered, quietly, to my worn-out pillow, head under the blanket, not daring to make my sister worry about me. I want to disappear. I rubbed my grainy face against the shabby and dusted pillowcase, considering taking a 3rd shift and just embracing an overwhelming amount of fatigue so I could spare money to treat my ugliness. I want to disappear. I was still thinking as my eyelids grew heavy enough to turn off my brain. Why does Darla get to have a room all for herself? And she even has a spare bed, my 15-year-old brother Sydney was screaming indignation. I don't remember, Sydney, Mom replied, her voice filled with exhaustion. You guys should take turns between the bedroom and the living room, okay? Sydney has been sleeping in the living room since we got too old to sleep all huddled in the same bedroom. Mom has the other bedroom, the smaller one. But she's been sleeping here forever, Sydney whined, his pubescent voice oscillating between baritone and tenor, both out of tune. Just sort it out between the two of you, okay? I have real concerns, Sydney. Mom dismissed him a little harshly. The boy looked like a pigeon that was surprised by a rock throw in his direction. What are you guys talking about? I asked, Finally waking up completely, where will I sleep? I'm not sharing a bedroom with Fartney. Calling my brother Fartney always made Darla and Mom smile, but neither of them acknowledged my presence. It was like I didn't exist, or like I was invisible. Sydney sat in my bed, contemplative. I screamed, "Hey!" because he was going to smash my legs with his big stinky butt. But nothing happened. I just felt a little discomfort in my calves for a second, like a static shock, as Sydney's body passed right through mine, making us both occupy the same space. I immediately tried to take a look at myself, and it was hard. I was barely a ghost. It was like I was a Photoshop layer whose opacity was no more than 10%. By the time I recovered from the shock, the three of them had left the room. I tried to cross the wall, but I couldn't. I had to walk right through the door like everyone else. If no one opened them for me, too bad. Automatic doors didn't open for me, and I couldn't hold objects. My hands just passed across them. I could see myself in the mirror, but the image was very faint. I was a living thing. It's just that no one could see me or remember me. My family had forgotten about me too. There was no place by the table for me, and no one bothered to turn on the TV when my favorite shows would be on. It was weird, hurtful, and freeing all at the same time. I was glad to notice that my family seemed to be doing slightly better without me existing. The house wasn't so unkempt, and my mom wasn't as overworked as she used to be. The 5 extra years of not being a single mother probably removed a huge load from her back. The first moments were dedicated to explore this new reality where, for all effects, I didn't exist and never had. I tried to figure out my new condition, but all I knew is that I wasn't dead and somehow erased from the normal world. It probably took me 3 hours walking around to realize I wasn't alone. I could see lots of barely corporeal creatures like me everywhere I went. Some of them walked aimlessly. Some seemed desperate because they had a purpose they couldn't fulfill anymore. Some seemed to have mastered walking through walls. But most were like me in that regard. Some were human. Some were not. I was fine with my new condition until I realized what being invisible meant. It meant I was part of the realm of the Forgotten Ones. There lived beings that were still between the living, but whose presence was so weak that everyone thought that they were dead, or simply forgot they ever existed in the first place. From what I experienced with my mom and siblings, it was clear that I belonged to the second group. From what I experienced later that day, I quickly learned that the other half was way more powerful, and they got stronger from draining the determination of others. All around me, there were apathetic human shapes. They had no will to go back to their normal, solid form. Most of them were so completely erased from existence that their face was a huge blur or looked like static. It was a sad place, and the only laughter came from the beasts, the ones that were thought extinct, but that little by little were regaining enough power to resurge into the non-invisible world. From behind me, I heard a raucous laughter, and a voice that sounded equal parts evil and bored. Well, 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 you must be new here. Part 2. The man wore a purple suit with vertical stripes that made him look even taller. Dark purple, bright purple, dark purple, bright purple, over and over. Then a towering, flamboyant velvet top hat. All a deliberate attempt to look silly. But he wasn't. Just by looking into his insanely light gray eyes, I knew there was smartness in them. He was something ancient. I could sense he had somehow been around for pretty much forever, although he looked 40-something. The not Mad Hatter was semi-corporeal, all wrapped in a faint green, ghostly glow. "Yes, I am," I replied, emotionless. While it was good to see a humanoid with a will to live, I just knew that he was trouble, and he didn't even need to have a 7 meters tall beast in tow, calmly held by a bulky purple leather rein. "I am Ekati. And you would be?" "I'm Abby." I was purposely letting him carry the conversation, simply following. I wasn't trying to outsmart him. I just knew he would like it. Ekati was self-sufficient and proud. He wanted to be flattered, but not too much. It had to be natural. Being a retail worker, this was pretty much my only talent. "How did you get here, Abby?" he asked. "I was thinking you'd know. You seem to be a big deal here. On my part, I just wished I was invisible." Ekati laughed with gusto. "Yeah, I saw you. There was a little crack in the reality in your area as you begged to be invisible. Couldn't help but wonder why you'd ask for that. I thought it was preposterous. Because I'm ugly." "You're what?" he asked, sounding actually confused. I couldn't help but notice he was the only one that looked directly at my blotched face, covered in pustules. In a long time, I started to explain what it meant to be an eyesore. No, I get it. I know this concept," he politely cut me off. "I've been around enough to understand all of your idiosyncrasies. It's just that it is irrelevant to my eyes. My vision only captures strength or weakness. And you, Abigail, are 1 in a million. But maybe you can't see that yet, since you keep wasting time with trifling ways to divide beings." "That's not how I wanted it to be," I retorted. "So, simply don't let it be that way. Do you want to leave this place?" he asked. At first, I thought that anything goes. I thought that it wasn't that bad. At least, no one was staring at me in disgust. But I soon realized that the beings in this realm were little by little ceasing to be. They became a blur, static, then dust, and literally nothing. They were worse than forgotten. Their existence was simply disintegrated. I had nothing in particular to live for, especially knowing that my family was doing all right. But something inside of me didn't want to give up and end like this. Maybe it was this unknown strength Ekati talked about. "Yes, of course I want to leave. This place is awful," my voice replied with an incisiveness I didn't recognize inside myself. "This place is awful for the weak." Once again he chuckled with gusto. "The strong are doing all right. Some of them are even about to resurface in the, that's how we call it here, concrete world. If I'm strong, why do I think this place is awful?" "Because you haven't been here long enough, and you still see yourself as your old self. A self that had to conceal their force for a long time." With a gracious movement, he removed a long cane from his pocket, then started to casually fidget with it. "But you know what, Abigail? I like you. There's potential in you, so I'll offer you a very good deal. You know what a dodo is, right?" "The extinct bird? Sure." He smiled complacently, seeming to be enjoying our every interaction immensely. "Extinct or forgotten?" Akadi lightly pulled the rein as I bit my lips in apprehension. There was no way, but it looked somehow like the pictures, only colossal. Is that... I had no idea it was... Why else would you humans hunt it down so relentlessly? Because it was fearless of its predators? Because it was fat and slow? Because it was tasty? This seemed to be particularly funny to Akadi. No, child, because they were scary, like the acid and hot flames of hell. For a while, I quietly watched the dodo's majestic beak that could easily rip off a grizzly bear's head like it was a bottle cap. Every one of its feathers was like the blades of a dagger, in a slightly rusty color that still made the beast look fluffy. If you weren't paying enough attention, it was all bones and razors and insanely muscular legs and fingers, ending in sharp nails, each over half my size. The ridiculously large bird was fearsome but graceful. It quietly shrieked, but it was enough to make me feel like my heart would stop forever. I never felt such a suffocating, crushing presence. Easy, girl, don't stare into the eyes, Akadi adverted. They will strip you of your sanity in 2 heartbeats. What? You'll slaughter living things until you collapse. Sure, you can't touch the concrete ones, but this place will be a mess. And it will be up to me to fix, so please, don't look into the eyes. You can't comprehend what you'll see. Not even I am able to understand the abyss that lives inside the dodo's eyes. Okay, I collected myself a little, but still felt the fear stuck in my throat. You said you had a really good deal for me. Good girl, Akadi praised me. It felt so good, although he was too phantasmal. He was the closest thing to warmth in such a cold world. Yes, I do. The quicker way out of here is by defying the dodo and winning. I'm his master. I'm the master of all there is. I patiently waited. There had to be more. That was no deal. Usually, people have to face the dodo straight on. They all lose, of course. But you have latent potential. I'll give you some time to improve yourself then. I'll give you 800,000 heartbeats. You will what? That's how we count the time here, you see? As you watch the first layer of the earth, only 1 day has passed. But you've actually been roaming around here for 43 years. It's a big place, so you didn't notice. When you focus, you'll see the time elapsing differently. 800,000 heartbeats would be around 1 week in the concrete world's time. He made an elegant reverence, using the top hat and cane. Make good use of it. Where should I meet you? I asked. Oh, don't worry, child. I'll come find you. And he pointed his cane in my direction, but way higher. The lengthy walking stick made an impossible dance in the air, like it had a mind of its own. Beautiful and terrifying. It shot stars, actual stars. Stars made of hot gas exploding in fire, ice, and deafening noise. A lot of shadows nearby dispersed, clearly crying in fear. They were of all sizes and shapes, all terrifying. From behind me, I heard a terrible squeal that made the earth tremble. Then, still stunned by the tinnitus, I turned to see a dreadful, furry, quadruped behemoth. Its long tusks were stained with bright black blood. There was a huge hole on its forehead, but the infinitely tough creature seemed to be more astonished than hurt. Be careful of the woolly mammoth. He isn't even close to forgiving you humans.